What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Week 7 edition of Injury Report Live here on DraftKings Network. I am Steve Buchanan alongside Meghan Townsley, and we're going to be going over all the injuries, all the things you need to know when building your Week 7 lineups for your season-long fantasy, for your DraftKings daily fantasy lineups, and any of your questions that you have as well. Make sure to drop them in the chat. If you're watching on YouTube, you can get us on Twitter at SBuchanan24, at Meghan Townsley with an extra Y at the end. We will get to them as the show goes along. But first and foremost, Meghan, how are you doing on this lovely Friday?
I'm doing amazing. It's a good day. We've had a lot of good reports come in, I will say. So even though we do have a little bit of a long list, a lot of these guys are expected to play. So, I mean, if they're good, I'm good too.
I'm going to preface this by saying that I'm probably going to sound very negative about a lot of things today, but you know what? I feel like that a lot of the injuries this week are almost kind of doing us a favor. There's a lot of bad matchups that a lot of these guys who are on the injury list are up against, or guys maybe you would use in place of them in bad matchups. So I'm going to be saying a lot of I'm steering clear of this, but I think there's a lot of reason behind that. So let's start off right away with someone who's going to be returning for the first time. Let's start with Nick Chubb, because I think a lot of questions are going to come up about Nick Chubb, what to do with him this week. And this is going to be something that I am honestly really kind of uncertain about at this point, because it's a very interesting situation for Nick Chubb this week. If everything was normal and he was playing and he's going up against the Cincinnati run defense, that's been okay, not great, but not terrible either, like not one you go out of your way to target against. And I would be very excited to be playing Nick Chubb, because he wouldn't be priced at $6K. I'll tell you that first and foremost, if everything was right and he was playing and everything. But this is what I don't know about, is that if they start running the ball heavily with Nick Chubb again, and I will go out and say, I don't think they're going to do that. I don't think he's going to come out here and do like his usual 20 carry, couple target workload that we'd see if he was healthy. But if they go back to a heavy run approach with Nick Chubb this week, that really kind of deviates from what they've been doing all season long. They have been a very pass-heavy offense, and that is not what we've seen from the Browns in the past. This is a team that's only run the ball 30%, 37% of the time this year. That is one of the lowest in the entire league. But, Meghan, this team needs a spark. They need to be gaining more than 240 total yards a game at this point. So, with the offensive line kind of being a mess, Cincinnati is a 5.5 point favorite. I'm sorry, 6 point favorite, moved literally as we're talking here. Cincinnati is a 6 point favorite now against the Browns. I think I'm staying away from Chubb, but I'm curious your thoughts about this situation.
Yeah, well, and first and foremost, I'm glad to see him even be able to return after how gruesome and horrific that injury was. And if you read his memoir that he released last week, he said that this, even though he did have a really serious injury at Georgia, this injury, he really considered not being able to play football again. So it's great to see him being able to suit up. But yes, he is healthy. It's the mental part for me that is not going to put any production on the field, because he hasn't played in however many weeks. It's been a long time. Now you're going to a team where the vibes and the morale are down. Okay. If you want to spark, put Jameis Winston in, like get that guy in the huddle. Okay. Because everything that's going on with Deshaun Watson is terrible. I just looked up his QBR right now. He has a 21.6 QBR. I just get that man out of the lineup, but it's probably not going to happen. So you throw Chubb into this situation with an offensive line that has allowed 31 sacks. That is the most in the league right now. I don't think it's a good situation for him. I don't think mentally it's going to be great. I'm staying away from him too.
Yeah, I think people are going to be excited to play Nick Chubb because, this is what they've been waiting for. They've been waiting for him to get back in that offense, but there are just so many things that I think really kind of make you pause and go, is this the right move? Especially when he's coming back from injury. Because really right now, Jerome Ford, I believe, has been ruled out already. And I think the only two healthy running backs for the Browns right now are Nick Chubb and Pierre Strong. So maybe Strong's getting a little more work here, but I would be very shocked if the Browns really kind of went balls to the wall with Chubb here. I don't think that's going to happen. And quite frankly, again, now, and the spread is, is moving as we're talking here. This game could easily escape the Browns, and we've seen that already. And for a team that's been passing as much as they have, really for necessity. It's not like Nick Chubb is going to be catching a lot of the backfield. That's really never been his game. Even though he's capable, it's just never really been in the offensive plans for him.
Yeah, I agree. And also, I mean, the Cincinnati defense, they were struggling obviously very early in the season. I would say this pass rush and their defensive line, they've improved throughout the season, but they haven't been allowing any explosive plays. So if you're like, okay,
Yeah.
maybe Chubb does break out, he has been great with that in the past. This defense has limited explosive plays of 20 yards or more, and that's the fourth best mark in the league. So I just honestly don't even see much positive coming out of this Browns offense, and I've been fading them a lot anyways.
Yeah, I'm with you. So I think we're kind of both on the same page. I think we're going to be steering
Mhm.
clear of Chubb this week. Most specifically on DraftKings, I'm definitely not playing him on DraftKings at 6K. The salary looks enticing because this is the lowest you're going to see someone like Nick Chubb, but I think it's a clear stay away from here. All right, where do you want to go after this? Because I know we have a long laundry list of injuries I want to get to, but let's roll and see what you want to talk about next.
Let's take it to Miami for okay, let me just say also the amount of concussions we've seen recently makes me think they should just implement the Guardian caps and everyone should wear it because Devon Achane, he just was cleared from concussion protocol. He hasn't been officially ruled that he's going to play, but he's expected to play. And this is a guy that they need out there in just a terrifying Miami offense that really has nothing much going for it. I mean, this like Tyreek Hill's every single stat on the board is down due to not having a quarterback. Snoop Huntley's trying his best, but if you want a spark out there, you need to get Achane out there. They're going against the Colts defense, who's about middle of the pack right now. They're allowing 4.6 yards per carry to running backs. And also, this is going to be one of the first games that we've seen, or first or second games that we'll have Mozart and Achane in the backfield.
Yep.
So that begs the question, which one are we leaning towards? Because they're probably going to split the carries. Last year, Mozart was just a dog. And I mean, won a lot of people's leagues too, coming off of a great season, but we haven't seen that same production from him. He's been in and out of the injury report. So are you leaning in either direction between Achane or Mozart going forward?
I mean, so this is only going to be the second game this season that these two
Second game,
guys are
okay.
going to be playing at the same time. So it really is kind of, we're not sure of how the split's going to go because we only saw week one is when they were playing together in that game against Jacksonville. Achane was, the lead back by only a couple carries there, but Achane has just been really bad other than week one and week two. Like his fall off has been dramatic over the past couple of weeks since then. And then you look at the price point, like on DraftKings, 6,700. That's absurd. 6,700 for what? What has he done to earn that salary? Like that is an absurdly high price for him, especially when you consider like some of the guys that are priced around him. Like, why would I pay 6,700 for him when I can play someone like David Montgomery, who's $100 less, or like Josh Jacobs against the Houston Texans, a few $100 less than him? Like, that is a price that I am steering clear from. So that would make me lean toward Mostert at this point. But again, it's like their roles really haven't been defined. We don't know how that split's going to work because when it came to the goal line carries, they split them almost right down the middle, 50-50 in week one against Jacksonville. So I don't know if I'm really excited to play one or the other. And I'll talk about like my lineup building strategy as we get into some of these other games, but I'm having a hard time finding a way to fit either one of these into my lineup when quite frankly, it's like, am I really confident in one of these guys really kind of separating from one another and being that guy who's going to take the majority of the carries? Because it's a coin flip at this point. If it's in like the 4K, 5K range for salary and these guys are splitting, then okay, I can take one, maybe feel good about that. And if I miss out, I miss out. But when they're in the high 6K range, that's a lot of salary to be eating up for complete uncertainty at this point. And it's unfortunate too, because the matchup's pretty good against the Colts. Like you mentioned, like they're kind of middle of the pack against the run. They haven't been great. They haven't been, bad against it, but it's enough where, I expect this game to be rather close. Like I don't think that one side is going to run away with it because both sides are dealing with a lot of injuries and the spread on this one's at 3. So we're talking about a field goal difference. So I don't feel confident in one of these guys over the other. I think that's kind of where I'm at right now. So again, I told you at the top of the show, it's going to be a lot of staying away from me this week, but I truly think that a lot of these injuries, there aren't like that piece that you can just implement and go, yep, this is the guy, or this is the situation. It's good. It's just a lot of someone's out and someone's in a bad spot, or the splits just don't make sense. So that's kind of where I'm at with the running backs here.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, this Miami offense is just so hard to figure out right now, obviously,
Yeah.
because they have to change the game plan a lot to see one, how Tyler Huntley is playing and who they're going up against. And I will say, Achane is just religiously injured. Last season, he missed 6 games too. This season, he had the ankle injury, and now he's dealing with concussion. This guy is just all over the board. And if you remember last season, a lot of his big explosive plays came in the final third of the yard or of the field, excuse me, because they were able to actually get down the field, but now they don't have Tua
Right.
under center to be able to get them down the field. He's not going to be scoring as many touchdowns. It sucks because he was one of my favorite players last year. I have him in my season long, so I'm still trying to decide, like, am I putting him in or am I not putting him in this week? So
Yeah.
I'm still pretty 50-50 on that as well. But I agree that if until we see kind of what that split in the backfield is going to be, it's kind of hard to put him in your lineups this week.
I would say if you had a pick, it is probably Achane at this point. But again, I wouldn't feel confident. And from at least the DraftKings side, he is too damn expensive to take that kind of risk, especially with some of the guys that are surrounding him. Somebody I do want to take a risk on in this same game. We just got word about 45 minutes ago, Jonathan Taylor is officially out this week against Miami. So now
Shocking.
it is kind of what we're back. Yeah, right. So it's kind of back to what we've seen over the past couple of weeks now. It's going to be Trey Sermon. And a couple of weeks ago, you and I talked about this. We didn't know what the split was going to be like. We didn't know how this was going to play out. Trey Sermon has by far been the lead back in this offense. And this is a perfect storm for him this week, because last week he took on that bell cow role. He had 18 carries, but they were abysmal. 18 carries for 29 yards. Meghan, if you took 18 carries in the NFL, I think you could get at least 30. That's how confident I would be in you.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, I mean, you're smooth. You got the moves. I think you could get in, make some missed tackles and all that.
Yeah.
But this is a perfect scenario now, because Sermon this week is in a much, much better matchup against Miami. And he burned so many people last week. And because of the poor play last week, his salary has come down about $500 than it was last week. So now we have Trey Sermon, who is going to be the lead back for the Colts, projecting at about 5 to 7% ownership, cheaper than he was last week. And Anthony Richardson's back in the mix. So you know what that means? Now I'm going back to the running backs. I'm steering clear of the wide receivers. I don't need Mr. Inaccuracy throwing to my receivers that I pick, and then he's not hitting these guys. I want Sermon in my lineups this week. I feel very good about that, and he's so much cheaper in a better matchup this week against Miami.
Okay, so this is one of the ones that we are actually happy about instead of steering clear.
Correct.
Yeah, I agree with you on this one. I mean, a couple weeks ago, we were kind of a little bit iffy about Sermon, but he dropped 18 points in the first game that he got his start. And so I do think he's able, I mean, he has the ability to get back to that kind of mark. I do want to talk about the Anthony Richardson finally coming back to the lineup. I feel like it's a game every week. Like, okay, if Anthony Richardson is starting, do not play these guys.
Right.
Except the only guy I will say is, if you want to take a little bit of a gamble, Alec Pierce, man, he is currently leading the league in deep field targets and receptions. He's averaging 28.2 yards per catch. That's a crazy number. And obviously, he doesn't have that many receptions, and all of them are like deep downfield. But you're getting Average back in the lineup. That's his favorite guy to go to. And this Dolphins secondary has been allowing a ton of explosive plays, especially over the 20-yard mark. So if you do want to take a gamble on one of these wide receivers, I do like Alec Pierce. I would stay away from Josh Downs, because when you look at the numbers of Josh Downs playing with Average versus with Joe Flacco, he only had 5 targets when Richardson was under center versus 9, 12, and 9 with Joe Flacco. So Josh Downs, just targets, I'm assuming, are going to go down. Michael Pittman Jr. just kind of, by the way, we thought he was going to sit last week, so that came out of nowhere, and then just popped in the lineup and scored a touchdown. So Pittman Jr., though, you can't trust Richardson because of his completion percentage. Just always all over the place. Alec Pierce is probably the only guy I'd go with, and then we do like Sermon.
And I also, and I have to throw it out there too. Like, and I talked about this a little bit last week. The Titans are very good defensively. I don't think they get enough credit for the credit that they deserve, in my opinion. So I was not surprised that the Colts offense kind of sputtered last week. That's going to be different this week against Miami. So if some of these guys burned you last week, don't take that recency bias and bring it into this week. Whole different matchup, whole different scenario. I'm with you on Pierce. I know he was targeted 4 times, didn't have a catch last week. He is on the injury report. He is questionable, so keep an eye on that one there. But, that has been somebody that Richardson has been trusting to go to. And like you mentioned, he's not going to get you 6 catches on 8 targets, but he might get you 2 catches on 4, and we're going to, 70, 80 yards at this point and maybe scoring a touchdown on that. So his ability to stretch the field is massive. He's cheap. No one's going to be going to him. He's like a tournament play that you can kind of think about here. But I do like your point a lot about Downs. I know he's been a target monster with Joe Flacco. Like you mentioned, not so much with Anthony Richardson. And you just can't trust Richardson at this point. His completion percentage is at like about 50%. His adjusted completion, I think, is about 65 or so, which is brutal. An adjusted completion percentage is basically the amount of targets, the amount of passes on target. So my word, like that's horrific to have that type of an adjusted completion percentage. So I'm with you on that. I'm definitely fading Downs this week. Good call on that one. Let's go to a lot of running back injuries this week, by the way. Let's go to this one about Aaron Jones going up against Minnesota. I'm sorry, going up against the Lions from Minnesota, 6,500 going up against the Lions. It sounds like they're uncertain if he is going to play this week, which to me leans towards more likely not than he is playing. So if he's out, I could not believe this. Obviously, his backup would be Ty Chandler at this point. So I said, oh, Chandler's going to be like dirt cheap. Chandler is 5,600 this week. I had to take off my glasses, put in my contacts to make sure my glasses still work. I know I can't swear on this show, but I'm like, are you effing kidding me? 5,600 for Ty Chandler. That is asinine. So I started looking up Chandler. He's taken 42 carries this year. So I looked up and I organized every running back that has at least 40 carries on the year. He is averaging 1.7 yards after contact this year. You know where that ranks him? 46 out of 46. Dead last. Now you're going up against Detroit, a very good team against the run, even without Hutchinson. Okay, so obviously you lose Aiden Hutchinson, huge loss. Barnes, Rodriguez, excellent against the run. And then you consider who some of these guys that Ty Chandler is priced around. Would you rather play Ty Chandler, who once he gets tackled or once there's contact made, he can't go anywhere? Or would you rather play Alexander Madison? Or would you rather play Trey Sermon? Or Tyler Algier is 5,100. Tyler Algier is cheaper than freaking Ty Chandler. So staying away from that. But this is also a long-winded way of saying, even if Aaron Jones plays, horrible spot. Absolutely horrible spot. And this is why I was saying, sometimes the injuries benefit us because you want to put somebody like Aaron Jones in your lineup every week, regardless of the matchup. This would be a matchup I'm sitting him regardless of if he's healthy or not. So complete fade on the Minnesota running backs this week. But my God, Ty Chandler that expensive? Inflation is hitting the DraftKings salaries at this point. That's what I've come up with.
That's the only answer. That's the only solution come up with. Yeah. No, and I mean, I believe this matchup could end up being a shootout because even though it's two good defenses, these offenses are both electric. I'm very excited for this matchup, for an NFC North matchup. Also, another injury that popped up, but we have TJ Hawkinson practicing in a limited fashion.
In the mix.
Which is crazy. I haven't heard that name in a long time. So I don't believe he has a status yet for this game, but he's back on the practice field. That's huge. You just add another weapon to this already electric Minnesota team, which again, I have to give my flowers to Sam Darnold because he's kept them on their feet. But I mean, this isn't me really saying play him or not play him, just kind of pointing that out. I do think though, that when you're taking it to if these running backs are going to be able to do anything against this Lions defense, it's very curious to me because without Aiden Hutchinson, like how much do you think this defensive line really matters, or it was really dependent on Aiden Hutchinson? Like, do you think there's going to be a big difference with him out moving forward?
Against the run or just all
Against the run? against the run?
Against the run, I would say that I mean, look, you cannot replace him, right? So like, I make that perfectly clear. But like I mentioned, like Barnes and Rodriguez on the defensive line have been excellent. Like they have like three of some of the highest rated guys against the run in the league on that defensive line. So obviously the loss of Hutchinson is huge, but like I still think this is going to be a really strong run defense overall. Like I mentioned, you can't replicate what he brings, but there are still some really strong guys on that defensive line to stop the run. So I want nothing. I mean, the Ty Chandler thing I think is crazy how expensive he is considering his role and what he hasn't done all year long. And then obviously Aaron Jones not in a great spot here, would be playing at less than 100% if he was playing. So that's something I would just steer clear from. But I agree with you. There's some good matchups here in this one where we could get a shootout. Anybody lining up against Byron Murphy Jr., which would be Amon-Ra St. Brown for a lot of those. Like those are the guys that you should be looking for in this game, not the ground game. Because really both sides have been good against the run, which is going to be, bringing a question for Gibbs and Montgomery as well. So definitely looking to look at some of those other guys this week.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, let's take it over to the Buccaneers because this backfield situation is one that I've been eyeing all week. So Rachaad White has been dealing with a foot injury. He didn't play last week versus the Saints, and that didn't matter because they still dropped a 50 burger on the Saints. We had Bucky Irving and Sean Tucker out of nowhere, just absolutely feasting. So now we take it to this week. Rachaad White was a limited participant on Thursday. Not sure if he's going to play or not, but it doesn't matter because the Buccaneers are saying they're going to play whoever has the hot hand, whoever
Our
is
favorite.
getting after it
Our
in
favorite.
the beginning. Running back by committee, right? So that begs the question, do you start any of these guys? Bucky Irving's been getting the majority of the snaps, but Sean Tucker dropped 38 fantasy points last week. Like, that's nuts. I will say, though, before I let you talk to your point, a lot of Sean Tucker's yards on the ground came in garbage time in the fourth quarter. So we had 192 from scrimmage. 107 of those came in the fourth quarter when they were already up 20 plus points. So I will say that about Sean Tucker. I want to hear what you have to say about this because I know we love hearing the running back by committee decision.
Oh, it's our favorite. I know that these teams don't care about our fantasy teams and our DraftKings things, but we do. We have to try to make these decisions. We have to. It's like the IRS. They say, "Hey, you owe us money." We have to figure it out on our own and figure out what we owe, or else we go to jail. I will say that again, this might be a benefit, and that even if Rachaad White was completely healthy, this is not a run defense you want to be going against. Baltimore has had maybe if it wasn't for the Lions, maybe one of the best run defenses in the league. So really bad spot for Rachaad White, really bad spot for anybody that they put out there, whether it be, Bucky Irving or whatnot, or Sean Tucker. So I think this is an easy stay away from me because, Rachaad White has been a better runner this year. He in years past, he was somebody that, doesn't gain a lot on his carries or whatever, but he's been more efficient this year. But this is not a defense I'm looking to go against. This is not a run defense that I'm looking to target against at any point. I would say if there's anybody that I would probably play, it probably would maybe be Tucker. And this is with Rachaad White out because I believe Tucker will be getting some of those targets out of the backfield. But, just carrying the ball alone, this is not a spot where I want to be looking to take any of those running backs here. This is a game where I'm probably going to be targeting Chris Godwin because I know Mike Evans has popped up on the injury report as well. And Godwin has just been an absolute monster playing out of the slot. That's probably the only Buccaneer that I would be excited to play this week. But against the run, Baltimore has been legit. And so I am steering clear of anything to do with that running back group this week.
Legit, or Baltimore's been legit in almost everything so far this season. Like they're really coming into form, but to kind of put some evidence out there that this defense, their first in rush yards allowed just 59 per game, and their first in yards per attempt allowed 2.9, about 3 per yard, which is just nuts. And kind of to explain why these running backs did so well against this Saints team, which we saw kind of, did not flourish last night on the best Thursday night football game we've ever seen. But the Saints allowed the sixth most EPA per rush throughout the league. And the Ravens are on the flip side of that.
Yeah.
So they were able to feast against the Saints, not so much against the Ravens. I will say I'm going to side with Bucky on this one. I believe that
Sure.
he could be the better pick just because he's gotten the majority of the snaps last week. He also, we've seen his ability to break tackles after being hit. He did have a fumble against, I believe, was that against the Falcons? I believe that was kind of a game ender over there. But I
Yeah.
do like Bucky. I see some talent in him. Or you could be the dreaded there's three people and there's three mouths that need to be fed. So maybe all of these guys could give you 9 points. It's kind of tough to see. My favorite pick so far of the week is going to be Chris Godwin because he also had a
Yeah.
monster game last week. 11 for 13, 37 point something fantasy points, I believe 37, 38. Just an absolute stud of a performer so far. He's third in the league in receiving yards right now. And Mike Evans did say he's expected to play, but he's always the one that gets locked up more. That leaves Chris Godwin open, and he's just
Yep.
able to have that connection with Baker Mayfield. So you did mention paying up for someone like Amon-Ra. I rather stay in, I mean, Godwin's still pretty expensive at 71, but I rather stay in that realm going against this Ravens passing defense that they are about middle of the league right now with yards allowed throughout the season. And I do think if this ends up being a shootout, Godwin could be the one to feast from that.
Without a doubt. I agree with you on that one there. We got some good news, or the Giants got some good news that Malik Neighbors looks like he will be able to play against the Eagles this week. He was cleared from his concussion, so good news for that. Philly has been very generous to opposing wide receivers, so the matchup sets up very well for him. This game, I think, has real shootout potential here with the Giants and the Eagles, so I'm really excited for this one here on Sunday on the early slate of games. And I think this is just going to be a massive knock to Darius Slayton, who has been great for us in the interim. You know, obviously the targets really shot up for him with Neighbors out of the when he's been out of the role there. Neighbors averaging just an absurd amount of targets at this point. But are you still willing to play Wan'Dale Robinson at this point? Because this is a point where, you know, Wan'Dale Robinson is the target leader for the Giants at this point, but that's obviously because Neighbors has been out the past couple weeks. But Neighbors, and we've talked about this numerous times here, Robinson has been someone that it just does not generate a lot of yards after the catch. The longest catch he has this year is 20 yards, which is absurd when you think about he has over 50 targets and I think 38 catches at this point. So what are your thoughts here on still using Wan'Dale Robinson now that Neighbors is back in the mix?
I'm not mad about it. I think 6,100 is a little too pricey for him, but I will say he has been very consistent. Like he doesn't drop the ball that much. Again, he doesn't collect that many yards after the catch, and he is pretty much in between the sticks the majority of the time. He's never past the sticks. And if you're going to have some deep shots from like Neighbors, he could be, I don't know. I'm a little 50-50 on this one. I do think if you have him in season long, that Wan'Dale is a good flex or maybe a wide receiver 3 in daily fantasy. I don't think I'd want to pay 6,100 for a guy that could get his targets eaten up by, the best receiver, odds on best receiver right now.
No, I mean, he's a PPR monster. Like, and that's the thing too, because if you look at all wide receivers in the league with at least 30 targets to their name, Wan'Dale Robinson has the lowest yards per reception at 7.6, and his average distance of target sits at 5, which is also one of the lowest amongst all those receivers with 30 targets. But he's catching like 6-7 balls a game at this point. So, everybody's going to be gravitating towards Neighbors because obviously he's the target monster. He's the flashy guy. He's the one that gets all the points. I still don't hate using Wan'Dale Robinson in this point here because I really think this game's going to be going back and forth during this early slate of games. I'm trying to look up the over-under for this game. It's set at 43, which I think is actually pretty low. I think it's actually we're going to see a game closer to 50 points in this one here, but I have no issues using Wan'Dale Robinson. I actually like Robinson more now that Neighbors is back, just because that ownership is going to come crashing down on Robinson because Neighbors is back in the offense here. But I think it's a great spot for everyone all around in this game.
Okay, what about the backfield though? Because Devin Singletary, he's been dealing with an injury as well. Right now, he's questionable, but Tyrone Tracy, he's been going off a little bit, especially with some receiving yards. He had 57 receiving yards last week, 50 rush yards, and a touchdown. So Devin Singletary, I'm pretty sure he's expected to play.
Yeah.
How do we feel about this matchup, as in the Eagles have given up 4.8 yards per carry. That's the 26 mark in the league, but only one rushing touchdown all year. So they're giving
Yep.
them the yards, but not really allowing a score in the red zone. So if these running backs are splitting the backfield, do you like either of them? Do you not like either of them? How are we feeling?
It's actually quite unfortunate because, like, I've loved what I've seen from Tracy over the past couple weeks. Like, he has been phenomenal. Like, and it's really unfortunate that Singletary is kind of coming in the mix here because Tracy has been someone that has been very good in relief of Singletary over the past couple weeks here. But you're right. Like, this is a tough spot against the Eagles. Like, this is a team that has been pretty good against the run, and I believe that the Giants are going to find themselves finding a lot more success through the air. And again, like having Neighbors being back in the mix, having, the role that Wan'Dale Robinson has right now, I think they're going to try to use that through the air. But again, when you're looking at like price point for these guys, they're priced really close again, and they're priced at, kind of in that 6K, mid 5K range, which, again, if we don't really know the role, because honestly, I would like to see Tracy more. I wish Tracy would be the RB1 in this offense, but that's just me talking. That's obviously has nothing to do with what they're going to run out for the game. But I would prefer Tracy personally, but I don't think with the way that they're priced, I don't think you can really feel good about that. And it is probably going to be Singletary as the lead back in this offense.
I will say that Brian Dable did mention, I believe it was either yesterday or the day before, that he's seen what Tracy has done and he has deserved to get more of the share in the backfield. Yeah. So head coach did say that, so we may see that moving forward. Okay, let's take it to San Francisco. We haven't heard their injury reports yet for Friday since it's a West Coast team. They won't be practicing yet, but currently we have Deebo Samuel and Jordan Mason, who has been such a stud for filling in for Christian McCaffrey recently. They both were limited participants in practice on Thursday. Okay. This one gives me a headache because Juwan Jennings did not participate on Thursday. He was, he's been such a clutch guy for me in fantasy recently. Okay, maybe just that one game in week 3. But
right, I was going to say, which one?
Yeah, no, I'm just kidding. Week 3. I'm going to hold on to that forever. So Juwan Jennings, I'm assuming, isn't going to play, did not participate. And then you have Deebo, who's dealing with a wrist injury, and Mason, a shoulder injury. That leaves 2 other guys that we're talking about. You have George Kittle, who I'll mention in a second, and then Brandon Ayuk, who has yet to hit pay dirt, only has 23 receptions so far and just over 300 yards. What is going on with Brandon Ayuk? And I will say this, before, as I was prepping for the show, I was like, let me go type in Brandon Ayuk highlights to Google. He came up with Brandon Ayuk 2023 highlights and then Game 5 highlights versus Arizona. I was like, are you serious? We can't even get a highlight reel for this man. So, are you even considering touching Ayuk in this matchup?
And not only that, all this nonsense that we had to digest in the offseason for this man. And he goes through all that. He puts us through all that rigorous rigmarole. And then this is what we get on the field. This is what we were all waiting for. My God, it's been horrible. And then I will say, here we go again. The matchup stinks. The Kansas City Chiefs have been stonewalling these perimeter wide receivers. The only guy that I am interested in playing this week on the 49ers, and it's by a long shot, is George Kittle. This is an A+ matchup for George Kittle. If you are playing anybody this week on the 49ers, it should be George Kittle. The Chiefs have allowed the most DraftKings fantasy points to the tight end position, 18.6 on the year. George Kittle has over double the red zone targets of any other tight end in the league with 11. So as you imagine, this is also much more than anybody else on the 49ers themselves as well. So this is a George Kittle game for me, who, by the way, if I'm not mistaken, is actually cheaper than Brandon Ayuk this week. So this is a George Kittle game for me. I would not be surprised if he's the highest scoring tight end on the week in this one, because if all these injuries come to fruition and you don't have Samuel and you don't have Mason, this is going to be, that ball is going to be traveling through George Kittle this week. So I would steer clear of Ayuk at this point. Bad matchup, bad year, bad production. He's just not, even when he's getting the ball, he's not really doing much with it. So this is I really think I will plant my flag on this one. I think this is going to be a massive George Kittle week. Thank me later. If it doesn't go well, don't even mention it, because I'll be I'll be down there with you. I will be feeling it too as well, because Kittle will be in a ton of my DraftKings lineups this week.
No, and I'm glad we agree on this one because Kittle is also one of my favorite picks for the week. I mean, just talking about his red zone production, he's got 10 of his 11 red zone targets for 5 touchdowns, and 4 of those have been in tight window situations, which the Chiefs are just this season. They've been forcing so many different tight window situations. Brock Purdy, he has completed 60% of his passes past the sticks, but the Chiefs have again forced the highest tight window percentage on those types of passes. So give it to George Kittle in those types of situations. This is also a Super Bowl rematch, so the tension's going to be high, energy is going to be high. George Kittle loves that. So just from a personality standpoint, I just think let George Kittle eat. If you don't want to pay for George Kittle right now, other guys around his salary, I will say, Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers is going up against the Los Angeles Rams, who also have allowed a decent amount of fantasy points to tight end. So I think that is a good matchup as well. Trey McBride is also someone else that I am really liking this week. Oh yeah, there's Bowers' salary, 5,800 right there. Trey McBride is also someone who I have been loving. He went 8 for 8 last week against the Green Bay Packers. Highest receptions, highest yardage for the season for him, 17.6 fantasy points. So those 3 tight ends, honestly, could all eat this week. And when you're looking at some of the player props for those as well, I want to shout out our very own Claudia, who put together a nice article talking about these tight ends and kind of some good spots for them. But Kittle over 51.5 receiving yards. Yeah. That's something that I would take for sure. Brock Bowers over 62.5 receiving yards. So those are 2 things to look to as you're kind of looking over the DraftKings Sportsbook. But it might be a week for tight ends, which we haven't really seen so far.
I'm glad you brought up the Super Bowl rematch. Little fun fact. Do you know where I watched the majority of the Super Bowl for this year?
Vegas.
Close. It was in a Popeyes in the Detroit airport, because I was flying home from Vegas, because I was at Vegas the entire week for the Super Bowl, but I was flying home day of. So I watched the majority of the Super Bowl in a Popeyes in the Detroit airport. And I took a picture and I sent it, and it's just like this little tiny TV on the Popeyes wall. And I was like one of the only people there, as you'd imagine. And you know what? It was okay. Because you know what? There's not many people that can say, I watched the Super Bowl at a Popeyes. And I can say that. And I will put that on my resume. I'll put that on my fun facts. But I thought that was worth sharing, because what the hell, whoever would have expected that type of atmosphere for the Super Bowl, especially after being in Vegas that entire week. I was there, but I ended up watching it in a Popeyes. Okay.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
All right, so I think really we only have a couple injuries that we want to get to. Let's talk about Brian Robinson Jr. Going up against the Carolina Panthers. I'll tell you, I have been somebody that has notoriously been kind of talking down about Austin Eckler. I actually might want to play him this week against the Carolina.
Really?
I know. Total fraud. Absolute fraud. I am acting like right now. I know. How can you trust me? I say one thing one week and then I totally change course this week. But here's what I will say. That's growth. That's what they call growth. But if Brian Robinson Jr. is out, and let me preface by saying that I'm not playing Eckler if Robinson is active, okay? But I will play Eckler if he is, if Robinson is out this week. He was in that RB1 role last week against Baltimore. Here we go again, talking about Baltimore, and didn't turn out that great. Not surprised. Baltimore is very good against the run. 10.8 DraftKings fantasy points in that game, 9 attempts, 21 yards, 4 catches for 47 yards, which, the catches have been pretty good. The yards have been there for the catches as well. Oh, man, is this such a better matchup against Carolina? Oh, you can beat Carolina on the ground. And I think that's really where this is going to kind of show itself, after we're watching this game here. Carolina is first in rush yards allowed, first in rushing touchdowns allowed, 16th in receiving yards as well. And I talked about how, my lineup construction for this week, I want to play a lot of these high-priced wide receivers. And if I'm doing that, I'm going to have to go pretty low on some of these running backs. So maybe Eckler is that guy. Maybe Eckler at 5,900 kind of fits the mold for me. If I'm using Eckler and maybe Trey Sermon, I can jam in guys like A.J. Brown and Amon-Ra St. Brown, because I want to play both of those guys, or, Neighbors or one of those guys. I can do that because there's enough value on defense, on tight end. You can even go cheap on some of these quarterbacks too as well. You can even do someone like Andy Dalton in this game, who's been really good past couple weeks, aside from Baltimore. But if you want to jam in some of these high-priced wide receiver guys, because I feel like this is a really high wide receiver week, Eckler is kind of falling into my lap. Not because I'm excited to play him, but the matchup is good. People are going to be totally off of him after that debacle last week. I think Eckler is very much in play for me this week, and it pains me to say that, truly. I do not feel good about doing this, but it's a Friday. Consider this like a Friday news dump. Maybe a lot of people won't see this, but that's kind of where I'm at with Eckler this week.
I'm honestly shocked. I will say last week, one of the biggest knocks we gave him was for not having a single goal line touch. Well, I was playing him or against him in my season-long fantasy, gets up to the goal line, 1 yard. I was like, that's great. Okay, but he still got a goal line touch. So, that's a tough defense. I'll give him that. I personally will not be playing Eckler in my lineups, but I do agree with your analysis, and I think that's fine. Alrighty, okay, let's take it to another big injury that we do have with Marvin Harrison Jr. Again, concussions have been running rampant recently. I will say yesterday he practiced in a full fashion, but in a red shirt, so non-contact. Today he was seen in his normal jersey, which is really good news. We don't have any updates on whether he's expected to play. He probably is going to be listed as questionable. This brings in so many different questions because, like I brought up Trey McBride earlier. Yep. When Marv left the game against the Green Bay Packers, he was immediately target number one. Finished 100% completion percentage or 8 for 8. So I believe he'll probably be the number one target if Marv is out. But also, there's Trey McBride there. What about Michael Wilson? Is this also a place where he could probably get his targets up? Because last week he did not eat at all. And I do believe that is because before Marv went out, Kyler Murray completed 3 of 6 of his passes outside. Yep. Then once he left, only 11% of his passes went out wide. The rest of them all went through the middle. So I believe if we get Marv back, not a good spot for Michael Wilson, but if he's out, I wouldn't be mad about that. 4,600 on DraftKings. This guy has the ability to get up and get the ball. I do think that you could either side with him or McBride. What do you think about Wilson, though? I'm curious.
I was really shocked about Wilson last week because I played Wilson last week because going up against Green Bay, that's a pretty good spot, right? Because, Green Bay's secondary has been, I don't have to tell you, it's been pretty lackluster all throughout the year. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. So I felt like this was kind of a perfect storm, right? Nobody's going to be on Wilson. I'll get him at low ownership. He's probably going to see a healthy dose of targets. It was not what I expected at all. Like, I was actually really surprised at the lack of looks his way. Like, granted, he caught that touchdown and that really saved his day because otherwise 2 catches for 21 yards. He doesn't catch that touchdown. Like, boy, you're really up the creek in that one. Like, that was a total bust. It was more, Greg Dortch was a little bit more involved, but I think what we learned last week is that, Trey McBride is going to be a big part of this offense. Trey McBride is going to continue to get those. He feels like the only consistent one in this offense at this point. James Conner still got a healthy dose of targets too as well, which is not something we've been seeing so far this year. It was like 3 or 4 straight weeks where he received like a single target. And that's like the complete opposite of what we saw last year because James Conner was such a workhorse last year, like getting, 15 carries, seeing like 5 or 6 targets a game, kind of back on track last week, drawing those 5 targets. So I think even if Harrison is out, I don't feel great about Wilson at this point. I don't, it would probably be Trey McBride for me. I think that's the safest option at this point. But I mean, Kyler Murray just can't get anything going. It's been it's been odd how much has struggling so far this year. Just this offense has been extremely sluggish for the past couple of weeks. So it really, I think it's just McBride or nothing for me. I think is going to be an easy one here because I think this is just going to be a sloppy game with the Chargers and all the injuries that really both sides have at this point. So I think it's going to be McBride or nothing for me at this point. That's the only guy I think I feel confident about.
I agree. And I mean, they're not going up against the easiest passing defense. The Chargers pass D ranks about middle of the pack in pass EPA, but they have the 4th lowest passing yards allowed so far through 6 weeks. And then also, I mean, some of their quarterbacks have been getting after the ball too. Christian Fulton, he's allowed just 8 receptions for 99 yards and 1 score on 16 targets this week. So they do have some talent back there. So I agree with you. I think Trey McBride is probably the only option here, especially because even when Kyler is scrambling, he's not even able to really pass on the run, and he only had 14
Right.
rushing yards last week too. So this Arizona offense is kind of just all over the place for me. And the Packers only pressured him on about 19% of his dropback. So it wasn't even the pressure going at him. So I'm not super excited about this matchup. I think the only one you can take out of here is Trey McBride.
I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to bring that up as well. Like that wasn't even a tough matchup. Like defensively, like the Packers haven't been great at getting to the quarterback. Like nothing. Like there was a lot to like about that matchup on paper, and it was the complete opposite for the Cardinals. So if they can't get that done against the Packers, no offense, what's going to happen against the Chargers this week? You know, like a much better team at getting to the quarterback. So don't feel good about the Cardinals at this one. So that's, like I said, McBride or nothing for me. I think we're done. I think we got to everything we wanted to get to.
I think that was good. Yeah. James Cook is going to play. That's the last one that I had because that was something that people were upset about for Monday Night Football. But James Cook is gearing towards being able to play this week.
Yeah, that was brutal. That was brutal. So close to lock. Couldn't find Steve Popeye's photo. I guarantee you, I might, if I can't find it in the next 10 seconds, then I'll just say forget it. But I mean, it is documented. It is out there. There it is.
Wow, fast.
There it is.
Speed right there.
Watching the Super Bowl at Popeyes. There you go. Yep, fantastic.
Popeyes, I appreciate it. That's awesome.
Hey, I was
framed and put in your background. Yeah,
I had my 5-piece tenders. You know, 2 sides of fries. Like I'm good. And they had cherry Pepsi, which is the best Pepsi out of them all. So that made me happy. I watched the Super Bowl. Then I got on the plane and saw like spurts because the Wi-Fi was terrible. But nonetheless, we made through it. We watched the Super Bowl in its replay when we got home. And we hope now that you can make some good decisions with your lineups because this is going to wrap up the Week 7 edition of Injury Report Live. We will be back here next Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern, to be getting you all the news and notes that you need. For Meghan Townsley, I am Steve Buchanan. We will check you next week.